The title of Lance's presentation is The Agile Career, how your career can evolve in unexpected ways and how to prepare yourself for the journey. So a bit of background to Lance. Lance is a graduate of Aberystwyth University, graduated in International Politics and Strategic Studies in 1985, and went on to gain an MBA from Harvard Business School in 1993. Lance is a chairman of several private equity and venture capital companies, including Reed and Mackay, and has previously been CEO of Tesco Mobile, Domino's Pizza PLC, and Saga PLC. The rest of his shortened CV is on the invite as well for you to have a look at later as well. But Lance's initial career when leaving his degree program was with the Royal Navy, spending 8 years serving on both submarines and surface ships. Lance, thank you so much for agreeing to present to our students today. Over to you. Thank you.
Andrew, thank you for that very kind introduction. Lovely to meet everybody virtually. It's a shame that we can't all be in a room together. And I'm assuming that you can all hear me because I know Andrew can, so that's a good sign. He's already introduced me, so I won't drag you through who I am and what I do. What I am going to do, if I may, is I'm going to spend up to half an hour or so taking you through my journey, really, kind of starting at ABBA and then what's happened since. And I'm doing that just because if I remember back to being at university, you don't get to have those conversations with people. It's very rare that anybody will actually sit down and say, look, let me tell you about a life and what has happened in it. I'm a big fan, actually, of reading biographies. No one's ever going to read mine because I don't think it's worth writing, probably. But I do think that you can learn a lot from reading biographies about what's happened in people's lives and what they've seen along the way. So the first thing I'm going to do is tell you my story. Then the second thing I'm going to do is to try and distill from that story half a dozen or so key lessons that I've picked up along the way. Looking back now with the hindsight of a 35-year career, and I really hope that some of those lessons will resonate with you, that there might be one or two gems there that you can hold on to and deploy as you set off into your careers or the next stage of your careers. And then if Andrew's happy, we can do some Q&A at that point. I don't know if that's a normal feature of your masterclasses, but I'll try and leave at least 20-25 minutes for Q&A, and happy to answer any question on any topic. There's pretty much nothing that I'm not happy to openly discuss and share with you. So hopefully that's an agenda that works for everybody, and I'm just going to plunge in.
Thank you, Lance.
So going to rewind the clock, what will sound a very long time ago to some of you, but feels incredibly recent to me, to 1985. I was at ABBA from 82 to 85. I was there on a Navy bursary. So I knew that I was going to join the Navy at the end of Aberystwyth. And indeed, I spent my summer holidays off with the Navy, which was a great kind of paid job, especially because after a year or two of being military and marching around and all that stuff, I realized that I could go sailing instead, and that the Navy would still pay me if I spent my summers as a sailing instructor. And so I then spent my last couple of summers at ABBA happily teaching people how to sail and getting paid for it. So there've basically been three major chapters to my career, and I think I'm now moving into the fourth chapter. The first kind of decade roughly was the military and my MBA. The second chapter was a career in marketing with a variety of different companies that I'll tell you about. The third chapter was chief executive of three and a half businesses, and I'll explain that to you as well. And now chapter 4 is chairing things. So it's what people in their business careers call going plural, which is a horrible phrase. But that's what I'm doing now, and that's where you do lots of things at once, maybe for a day each a week, and that has there's a lot of fun about that as well. So let's just rewind to 1985. I graduated that summer and joined the Navy, and I basically spent the next 6 years full time as a naval officer. Had my basic training down in Dartmouth in Devon. Then was immediately sent off to Scotland, where I spent most of the next 4 or 5 years operating in submarines out of the submarine base on the west coast in Faslane. And then my last year was back in London, west of London, underground. There's the military headquarters in the UK, where I was based for my last year. And that was a terrible mistake by the Navy. They gave me that opportunity as a kind of promotion and to give me insight into the future and what life was like as an admiral and so on. And I was basically the personal assistant to the admiral in charge of submarines. But the mistake that they made was they let me come home to my wife every night for a year. And at the end of that year of living like a normal human being, instead of underwater in a metal tube, I suddenly realized that that was my preference. And so I resigned and I left. I loved being in the Navy. It was a fantastic experience. It was a great place to start because it was so varied. And I got to travel all over the world, and I got to do amazing things that 23-year-olds don't get to do very often, like lead large teams of people, play a small role in strategic issues, play with cool technology, particularly in submarines, get scared in all kinds of different ways. But get physically scared and emotionally scared and put under pressure, and that didn't seem like much fun at the time. But by the time I was 30 or 35, I could look back on those experiences and go, you know what, that actually was really good for me because I've been stretched in different ways, and I'm now ready to deal with the rest of my life in a way that perhaps I wasn't. I was proud to defend my own nation for 5 or 6 years of my life as well. And I made some amazing friendships that have carried me forward. I'm not suggesting for 1 second that all of you on the call should rush off and join the Army or the Navy or the Air Force in your own country just because I did that. But what I am saying is that I was really glad that my first career was something so varied and so challenging and so stressful in different ways, and that it kind of set me up in various ways for the rest of my life. But there's an interesting lesson lurking in there that we'll come back to, which is if you'd met me at Aberystwyth in 1985, I would have told you I was going to be a naval officer. My career was going to be in the Navy, and I would be an admiral by the time I was in my 50s. And that was the person I was. And actually, it turned out I'm someone completely different to that. And the journey I originally set off along has had a huge number of twists and turns and unexpected zigzags along the way. And whilst the Navy was fantastic, life is unpredictable. And I left a Navy that I loved and loved being a part of because I met the person I wanted to be married to, and I wanted to spend my life with her rather than traveling the whole time and away the whole time. And so at the age of 27 or 8, I suddenly found myself thinking, I've got to reinvent myself from scratch. I've got to be a different person. I've got to abandon my naval career, because I was based up in Scotland and spending 8-9 months a year at sea, and my young lawyer wife was in London, and we were meeting 30-40 days a year, and that was it. And that was not sustainable. And I think for different reasons, lots of you on this call are going to have to reinvent yourselves along the way. There is very, very few people these days who enter a career at 21 and stick with it until they're 60, and that's it. It's almost unheard of. So there's a lesson I want to come back to there about change and reinvention. So that was chapter 1. Chapter 2, I left the Navy age 27, I think I was, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I just wanted to be with my other half, and I needed to get a job in order to earn a living. And I applied for lots of stuff. I had no idea what I wanted to be. I did know that I wanted to work with people on interesting things, but I knew nothing about business. You all know far more about business now than I did, age 27, because I've been underwater in a metal tube for the last 5 or 6 years. Until the last year when I got married, I hadn't really given any thought to leaving. And I think luck is part of life as well. And I got lucky because this is a true story, I was in a submarine underwater off the Falkland Islands in the South Atlantic, patrolling the Falkland Islands zone. And I had decided, lying in my bunk overnight, that I really should think about leaving the Navy because I wanted to be with my wife. And I went into the officers' dining room, the wardroom it's called, and there was an old copy of the Sunday Times, must have been a month or two old, otherwise we wouldn't have had it, lying around. And in the back of the Sunday Times, in those days anyway, they used to have jobs. Some of the older people on this call will remember that we used to look in the newspapers for our jobs. I found a little advert in the corner aimed specifically at military graduates. And it basically said, I've still got it somewhere in a file, and it basically said, if you're it actually said army officer, which I could have been insulted by, but that's okay. It said, if you're an army officer with a good degree and you're thinking of leaving, and you don't know what to do, but you have a good record and you're bright and inquisitive and high energy, give us a call. Maybe a career at Procter & Gamble could be for you. And I had never heard of Procter & Gamble and I didn't know what they did, but it sounded like it might be a job aimed at me. So I think it was 3 months later, got home to England, having cut this article out and hidden it because I didn't want the other officers to see it. And I got home and I phoned this number, and at the other end was a terribly polished former army officer called something like Humphrey Twittleston Hepplethwaite or something. And he said, "Oh, Submariner, eh? Oh, we think submariners are a good thing. We know that you're the cream of the cream. Why don't you come and have a chat with us?" And I got on a train and I went up to the north of England to Newcastle, where Procter & Gamble used to be based. And I had this advert with me, slightly tattered advert. And I thought I'd better do some research before I got there for an interview. And I bought at King's Cross Station the Economist Pocket Guide to Marketing. I didn't know what marketing was. So I started out going to M and reading about what marketing was and thought that sounds quite interesting, actually. Understanding consumer needs, developing products and services for them, communicating your products and services to the customer, learning and doing it all again. And then it's basically a little dictionary, this book. So I went through A to Z. And when I got to B, I got to brand management, and I discovered what a brand was because I didn't know. And then I discovered that brand management was apparently invented by Procter & Gamble in the 1930s. So I was on my way to see the company that had invented brand management. Anyway, I'll cut short that long-winded story and just tell you that I was lucky enough to be offered a job at Procter & Gamble, which is a great company. It's been around for 150 years. It's a great training ground. And I joined P&G at the age of, I think, 28. Up in Newcastle on a fresh winter's day. And I spent the next 9 years with them, or 10 years, learning the art of marketing and business from the bottom. And there was an ego hit involved. In fact, there were at least two. One ego hit was that I was 27, 28. I'd done well in the Navy. I was, an officer with a bit of prestige and seniority. And suddenly I had to start all over again at the bottom, because P&G only hires at the bottom. So they demoted me to the same status as a 21-year-old and the same salary as a 21-year-old as well. So my salary, unbelievable to leave the military and get your pay cut, but I managed it. I was given a 30 or 40% pay cut to join Procter & Gamble. So that was one ego hit. The second ego hit was that on a Friday, I had been a nuclear submarine navigator, which felt pretty cool. And when I went to cocktail parties and met pretty girls and they asked what I did, I would tell them I was a nuclear submarine navigator and they'd be interested in talking to me. And then on the Monday morning, I found myself as the assistant brand manager on Fairy Non-Bio powder. And suddenly people ran away from me when I met them at cocktail parties. And I struggled with my self-identity. I really did. I thought on the Friday that I was something quite important in my organization and in the nation. And on the Monday, I was a very, very junior businessman in a big company who knew nothing about his job, and it wasn't cool anymore. And I really wrestled with that challenge for several months. And then another lucky thing happened, although I think you make your own luck in life, and we'll come back to lessons later on. I had applied to a few business schools when I was leaving the Navy. I'd applied to London Business School, who said, we'll put you on a waiting list. I'd applied to INSEAD in Paris, who said, you don't have enough business experience, we're not interested in you. I'd applied to Stanford, who said, you don't know anything about tech, we're not interested in you. And I'd applied to Harvard. And I was a few months in at P&G, and a letter came through the postbox one day from Harvard Business School saying, we'd like to offer you a place in 6 months' time in Boston on our 2-year MBA. We look forward to seeing you. And I just couldn't believe this. In fact, my initial reaction was it was a wind-up from one of my old Navy mates. But I phoned them up and discovered it was true. And why did they take me? Well, they took me. My favorite answer to that question, which is relevant for all of you, whether you're undergrad or you're an MBA already or whatever, it's relevant for life, I think. They took me because I applied to start with. I had friends coming up to me, Navy friends, saying, well, do I hear you're going to business school? How did you get in? And my answer is, well, I applied. Have you applied? Because if you don't, you're not going to get in to Procter & Gamble or to Harvard or to ABBA to do your MBA or anywhere in life. If you don't have the self-motivation to go for it, then it isn't going to happen. It's another lesson I want to come back to talk about later on. I then spent the next 8 years with Procter & Gamble, where back at P&G. So what happened was I left P&G, I went off to Harvard, I came back to P&G, and I did another 7 years with them. And there's a little lesson in there too. So when I told my boss at Procter & Gamble that I had an offer from Harvard and I was leaving and I was going to go do it, she said, well, if you leave, you can't come back. We don't believe in MBAs at Procter & Gamble. We believe in line management experience and that we can teach you better than any school. And so it's a big decision you're making if you leave. And I stuck to my guns and I said I was going to leave and that I wanted to come back. And I worked really hard for 6 months and built friendships and relationships around the company. And then on my last day at P&G in summer of 91, she called me in to her office and said, okay, so I've called you in to say goodbye. However, there's a twist. I've been asking around about you and people say you're a good guy and that we should bring you back. But as I told you, we don't normally bring people back. However, I phoned head office in Cincinnati to check with them. And it turns out that I had the policy wrong. I thought the policy was we don't bring MBAs back, but actually we do if we like them. And so what I would like to know is if we pay for the MBA, will you come back in 2 years' time? And my jaw dropped and hit the floor, frankly, at that moment, because I had been psychologically ready to say goodbye to a business that I really loved, people that I really liked working with, and never to be allowed to come back. And instead, they were saying, we'll pay for the MBA if you'll come back in 2 years' time. And what I discovered later was that the reason she did that, and sorry, this is not meant to sound arrogant, but I'm just trying to lay out some experiences for you. The reason she had really done that was her secretary had gone in to see her and said, that guy Lance is leaving in two weeks' time. The other secretaries all say he's a really good guy and that he speaks to them every day and he says good morning and he remembers their birthdays and he's built really human relationships with them and that he's because he's a bit older, he was in the Navy and so on, he's got some authority, and we think he's a good guy and you should keep him. And that's why the boss phoned America to find out what the policy was. And there's a lesson there I really, really want to come back to later around people and the importance of relationships. So I'll accelerate a bit or we'll run out of time. I loved P&G. It was fantastic. It was quite linear. There's a way of doing everything at P&G, a bit like the Navy. They teach you how to do it and they expect you to do it that way. On the other hand, you get to do some cool stuff. I stopped being embarrassed about being the assistant brand manager on Fairy Non-Bio, and I was proud to be the brand manager of Vicks Vapor Rub, and I was proud to be the marketing manager of Clearasil Europe, and then I was proud to be the marketing director of Global Soaps, by which time I was based out in Cincinnati in the US. Then in 2000, the dot-com boom happened, which only the older people on the call will remember. The world suddenly went crazy as all the dot-coms started to invent themselves in California. And that's when companies like eBay and Facebook and Amazon and all the rest of them came into existence. And essentially everybody working in my office in Cincinnati, Ohio, jumped on a plane and headed for the West Coast. And I did the same, and I joined a young company, 5 years old, losing money, a few thousand employees in Seattle, called Amazon.com. At that time, Amazon only had books, and we had just launched music, and I was hired to launch into a new category of video. And the day they hired me, what they meant was video cassettes. Don't laugh. By the time I started my role 3 months later, it was video and DVD, because DVD was the new thing and we thought we'd better do that. And now, of course, it's all streaming and the world has changed. But I spent the next 6 or 9 months flying back and forth from Seattle to LA, trying to persuade the movie moguls to buy into this new thing called the internet. And most of them were not having it. And if you think about your caricature of an American movie mogul, you know, this is certainly in 2001, this is a big guy with a pinstripe suit and a cigar, and they really did look like that. And when this strange English guy came into their office, telling them the story of this thing called the internet and how all their sales one day were going to be online, several of them just threw me out. But there were one or two who were open-minded. Disney, they got it, and MGM were desperate because they were about to go bust. And being a Brit, I explained to them the whole James Bond franchise and how they could sell all their movies simultaneously through our site. They didn't really understand what I was talking about, but they thought they'd give it a try. And they sent me, I forget, 2 copies of each of the Bond movies, which they were really reluctant to part with. But they sent me 2 copies of each, and we put them in the distribution center in Seattle, and they all sold within a week. And then they sent me 2 more, and then 10 more, and then 20 more. And then they started to wake up to this concept of the internet. When I look back on my whole career, my one regret, really my only real regret, is I left Amazon too soon. I did 2.5 years there, initially on video, and then music, and then books, and then marketing worldwide. And I left for the wrong reasons. I left because a new boss came in for me to work for. Jeff Bezos had personally hired me, which is my bit of name dropping. But the company was growing so fast that even though I was doing quite well, more people were being hired all the time. And I got a new boss brought in above me who I didn't like and I didn't get along with. And I slightly stormed out. I'm exaggerating a bit to make a point, but I slightly threw my toys out of the pram and left after 2.5 years. And I've always looked back and said, why did I leave so soon? It was an amazing place. It was an amazing experience. We loved being in America, in Seattle. But there's a lesson there I want to come back to as well about how long do you give it before you change your mind. Came back to England, I was recruited to come back to England and joined Vodafone as the marketing director, just in time to launch 3G, which took us, I know you all laugh at 3G now, but that was the first real step into data on the phone. And having just come from Amazon, I was in a good position to start putting the internet onto phones for the first time. And again, another little story that will make you laugh. I was sitting in my office one day, and the guy who worked for me, who was responsible for buying phones, came in and said, "You'll never believe it. Apple have just said they're going to launch a phone. Like that's going to work. They'll get killed within 3 months." And he walked out of the room laughing. And we all know what happened, which is that, yeah, Apple dominates in that world now. I spent 4 years at Vodafone as the marketing director for the UK and then Europe. Then I spent 3 years at Tesco as the marketing director. And then Terry Leahy gave me my first break. I really wanted to be a CEO. And if you're a marketer, it can be hard to persuade people to make you the CEO. The comfort zone is with finance people because they can add up, and they're not sure if the marketing guy can add up. And they like it in an engineering company, they like engineers, and in a sales company, they like salespeople. But unless you're a Procter & Gamble or a Unilever, it can sometimes be hard for a marketeer to persuade that you should trust the marketing guy. And Terry Leahy decided to trust me, and he put me in charge of Tesco Mobile because I'd come out of telecoms, so he knew I knew that world. And I had my first CEO job, which I loved, absolutely loved, running a business. And we took Tesco Mobile, which was quite small. We managed to open a phone shop in all of Tesco's big stores, and you'll see those phone shops today if you're in the UK or in any of the other Tesco markets. And we grew that quite strongly, had a lot of fun. It was my first chance to pull all the levers, not just the marketing lever. And I loved doing that. Then I joined Domino's Pizza and ran the European business for them across UK, Germany, Ireland, Switzerland, and some of the West European markets. Totally different business. You could say, well, what's it got in common? How could you go from Tesco to pizza? How could you go from mobile phones to Tesco? And the answer is there are common threads that hold a career together. And my common threads were brand. Every one of those businesses is a strongly branded business. Customer service. Every one of those businesses relies on making the customer say, wow. People. In every case, I had big teams of people who needed to be motivated, share the vision, rewarded, and buy into what we were trying to do. And, by the time it was Domino's, it was 23,000 people spread across Europe. And those people needed to be led. And then just to round off on my story and then start talking about the lessons, the last executive job I did was running a company called Saga that some of you will know and some of you won't. It's aimed at the older generation in the UK. So if you're not in the UK, you'll never have heard of it. And most of you on the call will never have used it. Maybe your parents have. But it's aimed at the over 50s, and really it's aimed at the over 70s. And it does cruises and insurance and healthcare and all kinds of stuff for that retired generation. Any Americans on the call, it's a bit like AARP in the US. And I did that for 6 years, and that was a turnaround of a broken business, a really damaged business that had been underinvested for 20 years. The technology was out of date. The marketing was out of date. The products were generic and overpriced. The team was demotivated. And it was by far my toughest challenge in my career. And I loved it. I really struggled to fix it. It was so broken. And there are those who say I didn't manage to fix it. And frankly, it was a mixed story. In some ways, in every way, the company is a much better company than it was 7 years ago. But the share price dropped a lot during the time I was there. And there's a lesson there as well around how do you deal with the fact that in a career, not everything is going to succeed. Not everything is going to be a shiny success. So I finished that role after 6 years, which is, I'd always planned in my second half of my 50s, I'm now 57, by the way, I'd always planned that at about this age, I would move from full-time jobs and I'd been a CEO for 13 years by then, and become a chairman. And I now chair 3 companies, the Navy board, which is fun for me to go back to after all these years, a project for the government, and a charity. So a lovely mixture of different things. So that's my story, and I apologize for going on, but it hopefully gives you a bit of context when I now try to boil down those, whatever it is, 30 years, gosh, I feel old, 35 years of experience into 7 lessons that I have taken from all of that, that I hope might be valuable for you on the call. The first lesson is enjoy the journey. Life, depending on what religion you are, life is not a rehearsal. My view, I treat life as not a rehearsal. This is the one life I've been given, and I'm planning to get the most from it. So enjoy it. Now, that doesn't mean every day will be fun. There will be days you wake up in the morning and you're just not in the mood. There will be jobs where you're less happy than in other jobs. There will be bosses that you love, and there'll be bosses that you can't stand. There'll be happy times and less happy times. But overall, I'm blessed with being able to look back on those 35 years and say, I've had an amazing journey. I've loved it. And I haven't loved it because I've been a CEO. I've loved it because it's been an amazing journey. So I urge every one of you on the call to look at your future career and say, I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to have fun with it. I'm going to make it. You're writing the book of your own life. So have a mindset that this is going to be extraordinary. Don't be scared of it. Yeah, there'll be some scary stuff that happens along the way, and not everything will go well. But in the round, plunge in and go for it. But there is something linked to that, which is my second key point. And that is, if you find yourself doing something you really don't like, and I don't mean on a Wednesday morning, or even for a month or 2, but if you find yourself buried in the wrong part, you've taken the wrong avenue in life, just change it. It might be a bit embarrassing, or your mum might be disappointed, or your friends might be a bit shocked, or your boss might be offended. But if you, let's say you've qualified as an accountant and you're 3 years into the journey and you discover you hate that, well, then change. Go do something else. Life is not a rehearsal, remember? You do not want to spend 25, 30, 40% of your life in doing the wrong thing entirely. It's such a special gift, this life that we've got. Now, I think there's a hard balance to strike there, and I've tried to tell you a few stories along the way of things where I got it right and wrong. I nearly quit Procter & Gamble 3 or 4 times because people phoned me up with sexy offers to go do something else. And I didn't quit. I stayed with them for 8 years, and I'm so glad I did, because it was an amazing working environment. I had great friends, and I learned so much. It also set me up for the future. I regret leaving Amazon after 2.5 years, because there was so much more to squeeze from that. And the reason that I left was ego, really. I was grumpy that I had a boss who was different to me and was sometimes a bit rude and used bad language too often. And I thought he was, and I think I misread him, because he actually stayed for another 20 years. And people have told me that he was a good boss. It was more about me than it was him. Now, that doesn't mean the right answer is somewhere between 2.5 years and 10. What it means is, don't jump too quickly. Give your employer a chance to show you what they can offer. If you're not happy, go and see your boss and tell them. Always give them a chance to correct it if it's not right before you jump. Because a lot of companies will say, I had no idea you weren't enjoying that. Let's change it. Let's make it work. You're a good guy, or you're a good gal. I want this to work. Let's find a new career path for you, or put you on a different team, or give you a different boss, or move you on to another project, rather than lose talented people, because there are not enough talented people around. So give them a chance. But if it's just not working, you've given it a while, a year or 2, and you're not happy, change track And if you think about it, I started out as a naval officer. If you include university, I did 9 years of that. All my family knew I was going to be a naval officer. My whole self-identity was locked up in that, and I changed. And I changed because I was unhappy, not with the job, but with the separation, the personal separation. And I've never regretted leaving because I chose a higher priority. So lesson 1, enjoy the journey. Lesson 2, do what makes you happy. And if over an extended period you're not enjoying it, then change. Lesson 3, which underpins everything else I've said today, is it's all about people. Everything that you ever do in your career, I would argue beyond your career, in your personal life as well, and in academia and so on, everything is about people and people relationships. I used to joke that unless you're a rocket scientist, everything's about people. But actually, I've been watching with fascination the NASA project that's underway at the moment with the buggy that's driving around Mars. And I've been watching some of the video conferences that they've run. And you suddenly think, actually, even if you're a rocket scientist, everything's all about people. Motivated, fun, excited people who are enjoying being together and doing something cool. So what I would really urge you to do is to build relationships with those around you. Don't just work 9 to 5 and then get out as fast as you can. Make friends with the people you're working with. Buy that box of chocolates for your boss on her birthday. Go to the pub every now and again when they go out together. Life's so much more fun when you have a human relationship with those around you. Don't make enemies unless you absolutely have to. I've kind of stumbled once or twice along the way into very, very difficult relationships, but for the most part, I've managed to avoid that. And it's amazing how what goes around comes around. And that person that you knew 10 years ago that you thought you would never see again suddenly pops up on the interview panel for your next job or for your chairman opportunity or whatever it happens to be. Build friendships and alliances and give freely of yourself to those relationships. Open up to people as much as you're comfortable. Tell them who you are and what makes you tick, and you'll find that they do the same. Remember that story about how the secretary really is the one who got my MBA paid for? Just because I'd taken the trouble to go in and sit down and chat to her once a week and say hi. My 4th lesson is have a hinterland, have some balance, have things away from work. Being totally obsessed with your work is not the key to success. Now, I read a book just as I was leaving the Navy that had been written 10 years earlier by a guy that most of you've probably never heard of, but the professors on the call will have done, John Harvey Jones. Now, John Harvey Jones was an eminent British businessman in the 1970s, really, famous for his big hair and his moustache and his huge ties, coloured ties. Now, the interesting thing about John Harvey Jones was he was a submariner in the Navy. In fact, he was a submariner till he was 39. And he left the Navy because his daughter was disabled and he wanted to spend more time looking after her. And he ended up as the chairman of ICI, I think it was, huge chemicals industrial conglomerate. Now, the interesting thing about that was he wrote in that book about his transition to life in business. And what he said was, I left the office every day at 6 o'clock. And I decided when I left the Navy, I was going to leave the office every day at 6 o'clock, like John Harvey Jones. And initially, people were a bit shocked because in this hard driving professional environment of Procter & Gamble, the young graduates would stay till late every night to prove how serious they were. And then this 28, 29-year-old, they used to call me Dad, by the way, because they thought I was so old. Dad would leave the office at 6 o'clock every night to go home and see his wife and then family later on. And I can't say I always stuck to that all the way through my career. There were times where I had to work late, but I basically laid down my own guidelines, my guardrails very early, that I would be in by 8:30 and I would leave by 6. And I was willing to do a little bit at home if I had to. And of course I would stay if there was a crisis. But you cannot treat every day as a crisis or you will burn out. And you know what? I got promoted before most of those other guys who were staying later. And for me, balance has kept me sane throughout this crazy journey of variety that I've been on. The fact that I have a wife who I'm crazy about, and kids, and a family, and friendships, and some hobbies. I haven't spent enough time on the hobbies, but they're still alive. Is what has given me the energy to go back into the office every day, even when I'm struggling a bit at work. I really urge you to have balance in your career. My fifth lesson is learn new stuff. I'm sure this is something you talk about at ABBA, and you're all doing it at the moment, which is amazing. But you're, depending on how old you are listening to me talk, you might be 20, you might be 30, but you're early in your career, and you're probably going to be working till 60 plus. And if you still want to be relevant in 10 years time, 20 years time, let alone in 40 years time, you better keep learning. But also learning's fun, I think. So, and it doesn't always have to be work stuff, but I have done some work. I've done lots of work courses. Whenever my employer has let me do a course, I've done it. But also on the side, I went away and did a 2-year wine course. And I've just finishing a 1-year history course, because I think you need your brain to be developing all the time. I'm 57. If I don't keep learning, I'm going to go the wrong way very quickly and become an old person. And I don't want to do that. I want to keep learning. And I urge you to keep developing yourself. And I'm sure the profs on the course have thoughts about how you do that. But I could see, for example, a future career structure where 1 year in every 10, people break out from their career for a while and they go back and learn, do a bit of traveling and a bit of learning. I had a young man who worked for me in my last CEO job who ran a division, very high potential, 35-year-old. He had already gone away twice for a year each time with his other half traveling. And then he'd come back fresh and full of energy and attacked his career. And you know what? I don't think those breaks were hurting him at all. If you're good at what you do and you have energy, then people will always want you. My next lesson is be flexible. You can write a plan now. I did. I was always writing plans. And then I look back on them now at 57 and they're laughable. Not one of those plans was anything like the way that my career developed. I set off to be a naval officer. At 28, I became a marketer at P&G, 35 Amazon, 37 Vodafone. Then suddenly I was a CEO of a pizza company. Where did that come from? Then I was CEO of a travel and insurance business, and now I'm doing a bunch of different stuff, chairing things. My career is wildly different from what I thought it was going to be when I was at ABBA. It doesn't matter. Stay flexible. Look for opportunities throughout your career and see where they lead. You do not have to lock yourself into anything. My last lesson, I think I'm at number 7, and this is important, this one. You do not have to be a genius to have a great career. I am not a genius. Look, here's my secret tip to 43 people on this call. Yeah, I'm not a brilliantly clever guy. I'm bright. You're all bright, or you wouldn't be on these courses. I'm pretty bright, but I'm not brilliantly intelligent. I'm reasonably personable, but I'm also a little bit of an introvert. I hate big parties. I sneak away from them with a drink, I don't smoke, but figuratively, I go and smoke behind the bike shed. I'm not a global athlete. I was never on the first team for anything. I've made lots of mistakes along the way. You do not have to be a double first from Oxford, Harvard MBA, brilliantly clever and the funniest guy or gal in the room to be a success in your career. What you have to do is you have to be reasonably bright. You have to keep going when you get the knocks along the way, because stuff will go wrong. You have to make friends and build alliances and relationships and learn over time how to get other people to work with you and for you. You have to keep going. I'm not saying you will all end up as the CEO of companies, but everyone on this call has the ability to do really big and interesting stuff in wildly different environments. Some of you will be CEOs, some of you will be entrepreneurs who create your own businesses, some of you will work in government, Some of you will go into academia and share your wisdom with others. Doesn't really matter. Everyone on this call has the ability to be hugely successful. I'm proud of what I've done, but everywhere you go in life, you meet people who are wildly more successful than you. So what? If I look at my Harvard class, there are hugely successful multi-billionaires there, and I could spend my life obsessing about how successful they are, or I could just look back and say I've loved this journey, and urge you to have an equally enjoyable journey too. I'm now going to shut up and answer your questions. Andrew, hopefully 15 minutes is enough time for some Q&A.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Lance. Thanks very much. Yeah, I'll open it up then. So if you want to ask a question, if you could either type in the message box in the chat box or put your hand up, and then I can come to yourselves, and you can either ask the question or I'll read it off the chat area. Kitty, you mentioned about your identity crisis. How exactly did you overcome that, Lance?
That's a great question, Kitty. I'm trying to remember which of my various identity crises you might be referring to. Look, I think the thing is, I went through an identity crisis. So I went through a number of identity crises along the way, right? So I grew up abroad. I was sent back to England in my late teens. Then I arrived at Aberystwyth in 1982 with a suitcase, having never visited before, and walked up the hill, and had to work out who I was now going to be. Then I left the Navy at 27 or 8. And the way I got through that transition was partly through falling in love with my work. What I realized was that being a naval officer was cool, but I didn't like it very much. Whereas being the assistant brand manager on Ferry Non-Bio was not cool, but I really loved it. It was so interesting. On my first day in the office, my boss called me in and said, "Look, Lance, this is laughable, right? But what he said was, we're going to change the packaging on the 250 ml, baby soap powder, and we need to change this artwork on the top to say that that we've changed the ingredients. I'd like you to own that project." And my first thought was, that sounds a bit pathetic for a highly paid young business executive. And my second thought was, how do you do that? I have no idea how to do that. And I said to him, how do I do that? And he said, well, that's up to you. You're the assistant brand manager on Ferry Non-Bio, not me. Why don't you work out how to do it? Go do it. I'll give you a couple of tips. Go and talk to these two people. And he gave me the names of a guy and a woman who worked at the other end of the corridor, who I could go and get advice from. And I wandered along the corridor with this packet of soap powder and tapped on the door and got advice from these people. And it was the first time in my life someone had said to me, you work it out. Up until then, it had always been a bit like being an airline pilot. Memorize all this stuff and do it exactly as you're told, and then you're a good submariner. You don't actually want creative nuclear submariners making up their own ways of doing things. But in business, you have so much scope to create new ways of doing things. So I think that really helped me with the identity thing. What I started to realize was I loved it, and it was fun, and it was stimulating my creativity and my intellect in a way I'd never been allowed to do before. And then I made a bit of a joke of it. And before I knew it, I was really, really proud of what I was doing. So hopefully that answers a bit. I think my simple answer would be throw yourself in, give it 100%, and you'll enjoy it.
Great, thanks, Lance. And thanks, Kitty, for that question. Another one, Lance, is from Andy Dolloway. Thank you, Lance. What do you think success is?
That is such a powerful question, and it's a hard one to answer, because I'm sure there are different sorts of success. I'm not a trained philosopher. I'm not really equipped to answer it in the broad sense, but I'll try. So the one thing I'm clear on is I cannot look at my CV and say, oh, here's a successful guy. One, I think that's incredibly arrogant. Two, I haven't succeeded at everything I've done. How could I possibly say that's a success story when I know some of the things that I did, I screwed up along the way. Third, I think success is relevant in so many more fields than work. I actually personally think that there are other places that success matters more than at work. You know, I'm father of some sons. I think you can judge me on success later, depending on whether they're happy, fulfilled young men as they grow into life. And if they're not, then I personally would look at the end of my journey one day and say he failed. But my best shot would be success is throwing yourself in wholeheartedly to life, living it to the full, trying to help other people succeed and make their lives, you know, fun and fulfilling as well. Remember that phrase, life is not a rehearsal. You know, if you kind of live up to that challenge, then maybe that's probably my best shot at trying to answer the question what success is. Have you seized that amazing opportunity that you've been given?
Thank you, Lance, and thanks, Andy, for that question. Callum has a question, Lance, regarding your advice about building relationships and being flexible. Should those of us who want to be entrepreneurs and start our own business follow that relentlessly, or get a job after education and build relationships experience until we find success with a pet project?
I'm now the chair of one startup and two small businesses. But the startup's really interesting for me. It's run by a 36-year-old, and he's been running it for 7 years, right? So he started at 29, and it was his third startup. So I essentially think this guy came out of university and started things straight away. I don't think there's a formulaic answer to your question, because you're going to be making relationships in either scenario. The advantage of joining a company is the experience and training that you will get, and that it may help stimulate your ideas for what kind of a business you want to start yourself. And it will give you credibility when you're fundraising and building a team and so on. If you can say, you know, I was at Deloitte's for 3 years, or Procter & Gamble, or Computer World, or wherever it might be that you went to work. But I don't think it's obligatory. There are some people, and I'm sure some of you on this call, who have an entrepreneurial itch that just has to be scratched. And you know that you don't want to work in a big company ever, even for a couple of years. And I would say, remember my second or third thing, don't do what makes you unhappy. Now, if I think back to my P&G days, half of all the young men and women that I was working with have gone on to start their own businesses. What they did was they came into Procter's and they got an amazing training for about 3 years in marketing, consumer, organizational management, meeting management, how to manage money and all that stuff. They got the P&G quality control stamp on their resume, and then they went out and started businesses, and some of them have done some really cool stuff. But you can do the alternative as well. You can learn about relationship building. If you're doing your bachelor's or your master's at the moment in business, by definition, you're going to have quite a lot of technical skill if you choose to start a business immediately. And you're all smart. You'll carry on learning once you start your own business. So my answer, if one of my sons came to me and said, what would you do if you were me? My answer is go and get great training somewhere for 3 or 4 years and then start a business. But that's me, right? You're talking to a guy who spent a lot of his career in big companies and thinks that's a smart place to go. That doesn't make me right. That's just the way I chose. So I hope I'm not ducking the question. What I would say is build relationships, be flexible and learn, but you can do it in either environment. Kitty, you're welcome.
Thanks, Lance. Thank you for that question, Callum. Ethan Harris says, how easy is it to start over and try something new when you're in the wrong career, when you have family and responsibilities? That
is a very poignant question, because that's what I did. I was lucky in that my wife qualified as a lawyer just as I left the Navy. My income halved and hers doubled, and we just survived through the next 5 years. We couldn't afford to have kids, so we didn't for another 5 years until I was earning enough to balance things in the other way. Look, the answer to your question is it's not easy, but it's doable. I know so many people have done it. You just have to kind of cut your cloth. So if you buy an expensive house and borrow lots of money and then want to change career, that's going to be hard. But if you're on your own or you're with another half, depending on what your setup is, if you're willing to just flex for a while, you can usually transition to do something different. Once you're up and away in your career, you should hopefully have built up a little bit of savings and enough credibility to earn some money when you transition to a new career. But early on, as I was, so when I left Vodafone, I left out one thing in my long story, which is I tried a little startup at that point. I had no earnings for 18 months. I ran a startup. It didn't really work very well. We were using up all our savings. We thought we might have to sell the house. And I decided that sacrifice wasn't worth it. And I sold that little business and got back into big company life again. So it doesn't always work. But the answer is, if you know that you want to do something different, just do it. Find a way to make it work. Either that or marry a billionaire.
Thanks, Lance, and thanks for that question, Ethan. I've got 3 questions remaining. If we can see those through to the end, if that's all right with you, Lance.
Yes, of course.
Great. Okay, we've got Carl Hunter next. What motivated you to transition from being a CEO to chair multiple companies, and how do you see your career evolving in the future?
Thanks, Carl. Look, I loved being a CEO. I just loved it. It's such a privilege to be at the heart of events and to be someone who can see every element of a business and how it fits together, and to be held accountable for success or failure, and to be able to walk into the call center and have people come over and say hi. I mean, that's such a privilege. But I was pretty tired by the end. 13 years of CEOing. I was not burned out. I never quite got that far, but I was tired. So that was one thing. Secondly, I'm intellectually curious. You can see from my career path that involves nuclear submarines, mobile phones, pizza, cruise ships, and so on, that I like learning new stuff. And one of the advantages of chairing is you can chair about 4 or 5 different things at the same time, because they only take a day a week maximum. So I'm currently chairing a travel company, a print and telecoms company, a digital marketing platform, an anti-gambling harms charity, and the Navy Board. And so I love the breadth of stimulus that comes from all of that. And to answer the second part of your question, I hope to carry on doing a melange of different things. I'm 57. If I'm not still doing this at 70, it's because they've carried me out in a box. I'm really enjoying it. If I'm really honest with you, sneak preview here, it's much lower stress than being a CEO. So I don't see why I can't carry on doing this for the next 15 years. And, I've got enough time to go out for a run in the morning, or, go out for lunch with my other half or whatever. So I'm going to keep doing this. Thanks, Carl.
Great. Thanks, Lance. Thanks, Carl. Richard, his question is, let's look here. What advice would you give about getting the best out of people and teams, and what kind of environment do you need to create to get the best out of people?
Look, that's a big, complex question that you could do 2 semesters studying, but I'll give you my kind of 3 or 4 sentences. The first is something, I'm going to echo something I said earlier in my call, which is get to know people at a human level. These are not just your direct reports. These are your team. And if they're your team, then you should take them to the pub, go for lunch with them one-on-one, go for a walk, learn about who they are, find out what they really love in life. Where is their passion going, away from work? What clubs do they belong to? What's their hobby? Who they're going out with? What's bugging them? Why? What's keeping them awake at night? Secondly, treat them with dignity. You are going to have to fire people. That's a horrible thing to do. If you've built enough humanity and trust with people over time, and you've given them honest feedback over time, really honest feedback, this is what's good, this is what I'm struggling, this is where you're struggling, this is how I'm going to help you, and it's not worked, then when you eventually pull the plug, there's a human dignity there where they feel that you treated them as a human, as a real person, not just as a number. What kind of environment? I think you need, this will sound corny, but I really mean it. You need an open, trusting environment where people tell each other what they think, where they can challenge each other in front of each other. But the phrase I've borrowed over the years is, they're playing the ball, not the player. So you're not beating up a person, you're challenging what the ideas that are being discussed. And sorry, Richard, that's a short answer to a really long, complex question. Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Lance. Thanks, Stuart. And the last one comes from Faida. And this, there's two questions here, so I'll try and put the questions together. What are the key attributes that will enable individuals to climb to CEO position? And then on the back of that, Sonia has seconded the question with Faida, which is specifically about how could women climb the ladder to a CEO position.
Yes, great questions, or two overlapping questions. Great questions. So I'm going to overlap my answer, but Fayed's focus first. First of all, don't obsess about climbing to CEO, especially where I did a bit, because I started late after the Navy and I was a bit obsessed with playing catch up. And I spent too much of my time and energy worrying about how fast I got promoted or whether I was on track and so on. And after about 5 or 6 years, I relaxed and just started to enjoy the ride more and concentrate more on doing a great job in each job I was in. And that's how I made it. I think that if I'd carried on obsessing about looking like a CEO or persuading people I was going to be CEO, I might never have got there. It was only when I can't remember what, something went wrong. A job didn't go so well. I think it was the first half of my VODA time. I didn't do that well. And my boss told me, you've probably hit your level. And I then relaxed because I stopped obsessing about it. And then I got much better at my job because I was just concentrating on doing it really well and delivering above what the boss had asked for again and again and again. And then suddenly people started promoting me again at a point in my career where I thought I had stalled out. So I think my big piece of advice, Fayed, would be do the job you're in really well and don't always look way up the ladder and worry about when am I going to get the big one. And then Sonia, your question is such an important question. I'll start by echoing what I said to Fayed, which is concentrate on just doing a great job, doing it well. But then, and I'm very conscious that, this is the white male speaking here. So, but I will give you my perspective, having worked with some utterly brilliant women over the years and loved doing it. So firstly, if I may, I spent my first 7 years in a submarine underwater with a bunch of blokes. And then I left and joined Procter & Gamble. And my first boss was a woman. And she's one of the best bosses I've ever had. And my third boss was a woman. And my boss at Amazon was a woman. And if I had come out of the Navy with any preconceptions, those fantastic women that I worked for and with were just brilliant. And what they showed me was that you can do it in your way. So what I want to say to you, Sonia, is don't feel you need to do things in the way that men have done it. Do it in your way. And what I have seen with women as you have climbed the ranks of business steadily, inexorably over my career, and boy, it's been a joy to watch. I've loved watching it. It's been such a privilege to be part of that journey. Is that women, I have to be so careful not to generalize, do things in a slightly different way to men. And that's so good. A mixed team of men and women is a much better team than an all male or an all women team, if I dare say that. And I learned that when I left the Navy. And when I arrived at Saga, my last CEO job, the exec team was 8 blokes. And within 18 months, we had changed that to 3 women and 5 men. And it was a much better team. When I joined the board, it was 5 blokes. By the time I left, it was 4 men, 4 women. And in every case, it was a much, much better team. So if I may, at the risk of sounding patronizing in every sense, be yourself. Enjoy the femininity that you bring to your role, the fact that you're a woman. You will bring other things to the table that are so brilliant. And that mix of genders and indeed race as well, but that's another story, makes for a much stronger working environment, team, productivity, and so on. And I've loved the privilege of working with brilliant women all the way through my career. I've absolutely adored it.
That's great. Thank you. And thanks, Frida, for that, and Sonia. That brings us to the end of the seminar. Thank you so much, Lance, thank you so much for your frank and candid overview of your career and the successes and the pitfalls and all the other bits and pieces that you've discussed. And thank you. Thanks to the students for attending today as well. We have this recorded, so we will post the recording up for you. And I have taken note of Lance's send lessons as well, so that may be something that we can put into some format as well. But again, thank you, Lance, very much for that. That was an absolutely exceptional presentation, and really appreciate the time you spent with us today. Thank you.
You're welcome, Andrew. I'm hugely honoured to be asked back to my old university, and a great delight to virtually meet all of you on the call. Thank you for the questions as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, that's it then, folks. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.
Okay, all the best. Take care, everyone.